Hello folks, this is Jason Roggasch. This is a video I wanted to make today about American exceptionalism, the moon landings, and the real reason why America has never gone back to the moon, sent human beings back to the moon, and the reason why no other country has done it. This is a very, very weird video for me to make because I like to stay pretty logical, I like to stay pretty grounded. This is the one conspiracy that a lot of people don't even in the conspiracy community, people don't like to talk about. Even 9/11. I mean, there's people that are like, "Oh, the moon landings." I'm going to lay out a case really quickly for you, and let me know what you think. In 1969 was the first moon landing. Between 1969 and 1972, America sent six successful missions to the moon, landed 12 men on the moon, and returned all 12 of those men safely back to Earth. The first man to walk on the moon was Neil Armstrong, and the last was Gene Cernan. And Gene Cernan essentially turned the lights out on the Apollo program. So, we're talking 1969 when the first moon landings happened. The president of the United States was Tricky Dick Nixon, Richard Nixon, who is widely considered to be one of our more corrupt presidents. And I don't just say that because of Watergate. If you look up Richard Nixon as vice president under Eisenhower, some of the underhanded activities he got into even before then. Look up some of Alger Hiss and some other of that stuff. Checkers. There's some very interesting stuff about Richard Nixon. He was not a good man at all, and ran a lot of covert activity as vice president out of the Eisenhower White House. Very, very fundamentally interesting stuff there. He's president in 1969, and we're dealing with social issues in America, such as the civil rights issue. Black people had only been given the right to vote in 1968 for president. During the Civil Rights Act, we had the death of John Kennedy 6 years before, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Fred Hampton, the infiltration of the Black Panthers, COINTELPRO. You had the beginning of not the beginning, but you had the beginning really of the bad parts of the Vietnam War. You had the illegal bombings of Laos and Cambodia. You had the mad bomber Richard Nixon that came on later during the 69 to 1972 moon landings. And there are many other things that never mind that Richard Nixon was one of the key congressmen to get the so much of the space money to California. That's just an interesting fact. But so having said that, we're in 1969. I believe that the moon landings were done as a propaganda campaign for American exceptionalism. And American exceptionalism works in two ways. Number one, we're exceptional. We're scientifically superior. We won. Examples of this can be we won the Cold War by ourselves, and we won World War II by ourselves. It's making America the master of the planet and giving it an invincibility that simply is incorrect and wrong. Another way American exceptionalism works, and this, I'll give you examples of this, but another way American exceptionalism works is things that happen in other countries don't happen in this country. We are exceptions to the rule. Coup d'etats don't happen in this country, in America. Presidents aren't killed by powerful, other powerful king types or, that kind of thing. They're killed by lone nuts. We don't remember in the 1980s when we would always hear about communist Russia and how they were always spying on their people and they were monitoring their people and their people had no freedom. I mean, they were constantly being watched and monitored and they just knew, and it was like 1984. And then we find out in 2014 that 15, even before then, that the NSA has been watching Americans, all this whole entire time. They listen to emails and phone conversations and texts. And then we learned through Freedom of Information Acts, even before 2014 in the 90s, that the FBI had files on literally any American who had ever been involved in any political activity whatsoever. It's shocking the amount of files that the FBI was keeping on its own citizens. The exact same thing that we heard that the KGB and the other people were doing in Russia. But we're exceptional. But we were told in the 80s we're exceptional. We don't do that. We're not like them. But we found out we're just like them. We just have a different political and economic system. But all governments are essentially the same. It's all about control and keeping that control. And other things. That's an oversimplification, but essentially that's what it is. So you have this American exceptionalism, and that's where the moon landings come in. Now, the moon landings are crucial for this because what it does is it gets America back on board with empire. It gets America back on board with making America great. It's giving America pride in itself again in a way that really, if you think about that kind of pride that Americans had in the space program, it's pretty overwhelming. I noticed that a lot of people who grew up in that time, and I'll be speaking to a lot of them. A lot of them are actually subscribers to my channel. That grew up during the moon landings and believe that the moon landings were absolutely real, they like the television show Star Trek. They grew up looking at a poster of a Lem on their wall, and they had the models. They were taught in schools, advertised to bejesus and back. Everything had a, it's like today with everything has a Batman and Superman logo, the chips, same thing back then, less products obviously, but it was the moon landings were everything was moons and astronauts and spaceships. So there was an emotional attachment to the moon landings and rightfully so, by the way, because I think we would all agree that the greatest technological achievement of mankind is taking human beings from Earth and putting them on the moon and then bringing those human beings back safely. That is the greatest technological achievement man has ever had. And it happened 44 years ago. 1972 was the last time. 44 years. And in 44 years, no other country, including America, has taken that technology and put a man on the moon, or a woman on the moon, and a woman on the moon. Think of the propaganda campaign. First married couple on the moon, starting civilization, human civilization in space. All kinds of crap you could use this for propaganda. And any country could have done it because in 44 years, surely somebody would have come up with the ability to mimic a widely available technology all over the place. I mean, on the internet, you can pretty much find how it was done, from the spacesuits to the rocket technology to almost virtually all of it. And no other country has done that, including America. What goes to my point moreover on this is when George W. Bush was president, he said we were going to send a man to the moon in 2015. When Barack Obama became president, and NASA, more NASA than Barack Obama, scrapped that program and decided that we're going to not go to the moon, but we're going to Mars. Now, common sense would say to you, oh, okay, what? And the reasoning was, and their slogan was, NASA, and then Obama used it, and then the Mythbusters. Adam Savage of the Mythbusters I find incredibly unctuous, so I don't like the Mythbusters. I'm not a fan. I think a lot of their stuff is jaded, and anyway. So they all use the same slogan, been there, done that. Now that's some childish shit, if I've ever heard it. It's been there, done that. That's why we're not going back to the moon. Like it's some kind of just afterthought. We've done it so many times. We did it 6 times, and the last time was 44 years ago. I think we could take one more run at it. I think maybe before we shoot our load towards Mars, we should make sure that we can still land a fucking ship and get human beings off on another body and then get them back. But we're not doing it. It's shocking to me that people don't call it for what it is. And more people are moving towards the moon landings being hoaxes, I believe, because the science, a lot of people have helped with this. A lot of people online, Jarrah White and Ralph Renee, his casings work, et cetera, and others. This has been a big deal because the moon landings, the technological advancement that the moon landings gave us and the kind of technology that it showed was unbelievable. And again, it wasn't 4 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It was 44 years ago. 44 years. I'm 40. There's no been land on the moon since I wasn't even born when the last man was on the moon. And I would sure love to see a woman or a man on the moon. I mean, think about that propaganda campaign. They'd be the most famous people on the planet. But we're not doing that. Another thing to digest is they asked Sally Ride during the Reagan administration. Sally Ride, of course, the famous female astronaut, American female astronaut. They asked her to come up with how much it would cost to go back to the moon. And she said it would take 20 years and it would be more expensive, even adjusted for inflation, to return to the moon. How is that possible? How is it possible that I'm staring in my office right now at 2 television sets? One television set is from just 2003, 13 years ago. 2003. It's a 32-inch television set. It's a Sharp. It's still works. It's made of glass. It weighs 120 pounds. And I can't move it by itself because it's wonky. It's awkward. Then I look on my wall over here, and I have a 42-inch television set. It is I don't know what brand it is. It weighs a 42-inch television set, flat screen. I can use on my computer. I can play high-definition movies on it. And it weighs 35 pounds. And that is 2013. There's even lighter ones today that look better. My point is very simple. The technology in our television sets, the technology in our cell phones, the technology in our processing power, it wasn't there in 1972 to go to the moon. And I think it's starting to be recognized, and I think that's the real reason why we haven't gone back to the moon. Some conspiracy retards, like Rich Planet, like Andrew Johnson in Rich Planet, like Richard Hoagland, will tell you glass structures on the moon. They will tell you there's a secret space program that, in fact, we go back and forth to the moon all the time. Based on nothing, by the way, based on no facts, based on absolutely no evidence. I base the fact that we didn't go to the moon on just simple common sense and reason. They base it on their love of science fiction. Aliens warned us, that kind of shit. The real reason is, I mean, Richard Hoagland's the glass structures and his hyperdimensional physics to Mars and all that shit. These guys, though, they would rather believe that fantasy. They'd rather believe aliens, than, you know what? Look around you. The technology that you have today is pretty great, but it's still, and there was nowhere near any of this in 1972. And we supposedly went to the moon, and then nobody took that technology and refined it, made it better in 44 years and sent in not one country, not a group of countries together, not even America, the great, the bold, the beautiful, Purple Mountain's majesty. I mean, nobody does this. No woman is on the moon. I mean, folks. Oh, by the way, the moon is a representation in mythology of a female. So it would even be more. It'd be like, oh, and we of course know that the woman, because of their menstruation cycles, plus there are the man was God, the man was the sun because it's the greater, blah, 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 you know, the whole thing. And they have the menstruation cycles that people would use, about the moon and women. Wouldn't that be I mean, think about, I don't mean the menstruation, that was a little crass, but what I'm saying is, it would, as a ancient symbol of female, the moon would be, I mean, you could eat that shit up. And everybody would, especially women. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton running. You got people calling people sexist because they want to vote for Bernie Sanders. You know what I mean? So think about a female think about the pride that would instill, and the propaganda campaign that would instill. It'd be amazing. But nobody's done it. It's shocking to me. It makes no sense. It doesn't pass common sense. It doesn't pass logic or reason. And I'll leave you with this. Every documentary you'll ever see about the moon landings, you'll see one thing they say. There's actually more technology in your vehicle, in your car, underneath the hood, than there was in the rockets that took man to the moon. And everyone laughs. That's the answer right there. Right there, you gave the answer away in your joke, in your shitty, flaccid, I'm so clever that I just gave it all away. Some asshole writes this who believes that we went to the moon and then writes that thing and just laughs it off. More technology in your Buick Skylark than was in the fucking Apollo moon landing. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. I mean, right there, red flags. Thank you for listening, folks, and have a great day.